Why persecute me for telling the truth? I have actually seen a vision. And who am I that I can withstand God? Or why does the world think to make me deny what I have actually seen? These are the raw, unpolished words of a young Joseph Smith, recorded in his personal history as he looked back on the immediate, baffling aftermath of his earliest spiritual encounters. He was not writing from a place of distant, comfortable theological reflection. He was writing as a young man who had experienced the shattering of his entire social world. The very moment he stepped out of the woods of Palmyra, New York, with the light of heaven still burning in his eyes, he was met not with curiosity, not with holy awe, but with a cold, mocking wall of skepticism and hostility from the very people who had watched him grow from a child. These were the men who had hired him to dig their wells, the storekeepers who had weighed his family's meager bushels of wheat, the ministers who had sat in their parlor rooms discussing the state of his soul, and the neighbors who had shared the heavy labor of clearing the thick, stubborn forests of western New York. To them, he was not a prophet. He was merely Joe Smith, the poor farm boy from down the road, whose family was chronically in debt and whose hands were calloused from daily manual labor. The physical cost of this immediate rejection was deep, personal, and exhausting. Imagine a 17-year-old boy carrying a burden of revelation that would reshape the spiritual landscape of the world, having to walk down the dusty streets of his own town while his neighbors crossed the street to avoid him, or worse, gathered in small, murmuring groups on the corners to laugh at his expense. In early 19th century Palmyra, reputation was everything. It was a small, tightly knit agricultural community where survival depended on mutual trust, cooperative labor, and shared religious respectability. When Joseph spoke his truth, he did not just risk his social standing. He put his family's survival on the line. The local ministers, men of high education and social influence who should have been the first to offer spiritual guidance, became his most vocal persecutors. They used their pulpits to warn the town against the delusion of the Smith family. The very people who had known Joseph as an honest, hard-working boy suddenly began to rewrite his history, transforming his quietness into deception and his poverty into proof of low character. The price Joseph paid was the total loss of his familiar world. Before he ever had a congregation, before he ever built a temple, before he ever had thousands of followers cheering his name, he had the cold, unyielding silence of a hometown that refused to believe he could be anything more than what they had always seen. Chosen one, you know this exact weight. You know what it feels like to walk into a room filled with people who have known you for years, only to realize that they are looking at a version of you that died a long time ago. You have felt the sting of sitting across a dinner table from family members, old childhood friends, or longtime associates, sharing a glimpse of the vision, the calling, or the deep spiritual shift that is happening inside of you, only to be met with blank stares, polite deflections, or outright ridicule. They look at you and they do not see the calling. They see your past. They see the mistakes you made when you were younger. They see your economic struggles, your old personality traits, your family baggage, and the limitations of the environment you both grew up in. They want to keep you in the neat, predictable box they built for you years ago, because your growth is an uncomfortable mirror to their own stagnation. When you begin to step into your true spiritual identity, it disrupts the social contract of your old circles. They demand that you remain the person they are comfortable with, and when you refuse to play that role, their affection turns to skepticism, and their support turns to silence. The enemy of your soul has been using this exact dynamic to whisper a devastating lie into your spirit during this season of isolation. He has been telling you that because the people closest to you cannot see your value, you must not have any. He has been whispering that your calling is a delusion, that your spiritual growth is just an act of pride, and that if God had truly chosen you, the people who love you most would be the first to recognize it. This lie is designed to strike at your deepest human need, the desire to be seen, validated, and loved by your own tribe. It is a highly strategic weapon meant to make you retract your hands from the plow before you ever break ground. The enemy knows that if he can convince you that your hometown's rejection is a verdict on your calling, you will abandon the assignment out of sheer emotional exhaustion. You will begin to trim your glory to fit their low-ceilinged rooms. You will quiet your voice, hide your gifts, and slip back into the comfortable, suffocating identity of the person you used to be, just to keep the peace. But you must understand that the rejection you are experiencing is not a sign that you have failed. It is the definitive proof that you are moving out of their territory and into your destiny. To understand why this is happening to you, you must look closely at the historical reality that Joseph Smith faced in Palmyra, New York. In his mother Lucy Mack Smith's detailed history, she records the agonizing struggles of a family trying to protect a sacred calling in the midst of local betrayal. When the work of translating the Book of Mormon began, the opposition did not come from distant theological centers. It came from their immediate neighbors. These neighbors formed committees. They held public meetings. They entered into a solemn, written covenant pledging that they would never purchase the Book of Mormon, nor would they allow their families to read it. They actively pressured Egbert B. Grandin, the local printer in Palmyra, to stop the press, threatening him with financial ruin if he proceeded to print Joseph's translation. Think of the sheer malice required for an entire community to organize an economic boycott against a poor family's livelihood simply because they could not accept that God had spoken to one of their own. This opposition was not merely passive skepticism. It was active, organized warfare. During the printing process, a local resident named Abner Cole, writing under the pseudonym Obadiah Dogberry, in his local newspaper The Reflector, used his access to Grandin's print shop on Sundays to steal sheets of the newly printed Book of Mormon pages. He then published them in his paper, accompanied by mocking commentary designed to turn the entire county against Joseph before the book was even bound. Joseph had to travel through the snow from Pennsylvania to Palmyra just to confront Cole and defend his intellectual and spiritual property. At the same time, local mobs, often led by men who had previously been friendly with the Smith family, searched the Smith property, threatened their lives, and tried to find the golden plates. This was not a theological debate. It was a physical, emotional, and social siege carried out by people Joseph had known, worked with, and trusted since he was 10 years old. The people who should have defended him were the ones holding the torches outside his door. The spiritual principle embedded in this historical pattern is both brutal and liberating. The assignment is rarely received first by those who knew the person before the calling. This is a law of the prophetic path. Familiarity breeds a specific kind of blindness that makes it almost impossible for people to see the hand of God resting on someone they have seen in their ordinary human moments. When people have watched you stumble, watched you grow up, or simply watched you live an ordinary life, their minds are locked into a physical, earthly perception of who you are. To accept that God has suddenly anointed you, given you a unique assignment, or elevated your spiritual authority would require them to examine their own lives, their own lack of spiritual surrender, and their own relationship with the heavens. It is far easier for them to dismiss your calling as madness, pride, or a phase than it is to acknowledge that God is doing something extraordinary in their midst through someone they consider an equal, or worse, an inferior. Your hometown, your family, and your old friends are looking at you with human eyes, using a human ledger to measure your spiritual worth. But God does not consult your past to determine your future, nor does He ask permission from your social circle before He pours His Spirit upon you. The rejection of the familiar is actually a divine mechanism designed to preserve the purity of your assignment. If Joseph Smith had been accepted, celebrated, and funded by his neighbors in Palmyra, the restoration would have been shaped by the compromises of local opinion. He would have been beholden to the expectations of the Palmyra gentry. He would have built a church that was comfortable for the people of Western New York, rather than a global kingdom designed to prepare the world for the second coming of Christ. The rejection he faced forced him to look outward, to lift his eyes to the horizon, and to find the people God had already prepared in other places. People like Oliver Cowdery, Parley P. Pratt, and Brigham Young, who would receive the message fresh, without the distorting lens of childhood familiarity. This means that the isolation you feel right now is not your punishment. It is your preparation. God is using the silence of your closest circles to cure you of your addiction to human approval. As long as you require the validation of your family, your old friends, or your hometown to feel secure in your calling, you are not yet ready to carry the weight of what God wants to give you. If their praise can make you, their rejection can break you. God must allow you to walk through the fire of being misunderstood by the people who should understand you best, so that your root system goes down deep into Him alone. He is stripping away the horizontal support beams of your life so that you are forced to rely entirely on the vertical column of His grace. When you have survived the coldness of your own home, you will be unshakable when you face the storms of the world. You will no longer beg for a seat at tables that were never designed to hold the weight of your destiny. Look at how Joseph Smith responded to the rejection of Palmyra. He did not spend his days trying to convince his old neighbors that he was telling the truth. He did not write letters pleading for their understanding. He did not modify the translation of the book to make it more palatable to the local ministers. Instead, he took the few who believed, packed up his family, and moved. He moved to Fayette. He moved to Kirtland. He moved to Missouri. He moved to Illinois. He kept moving toward the places where the soil was ready for the seed. He understood that his assignment was too urgent to waste years trying to wake up people who had committed themselves to sleeping. He left the security of the familiar because he knew that the kingdom of God is always built on the frontier, never in the comfortable parlors of the past. He built the church not with the skeptical bystanders of Palmyra, but with seekers who encountered the restoration with open hearts and clean slates. Chosen one, it is time for you to do the same. It is time for you to stop waiting for your family to understand your spiritual devotion. It is time to stop waiting for your old friends to celebrate your growth, your new boundaries, or your divine assignment. They may never understand. They may always talk about you in the past tense, reminding each other of who you used to be as if that person still exists. Let them. Your growth is not dependent on their permission, and your destiny does not require their signature. You must release them from the burden of validating a version of you they do not have the spiritual capacity to see. The very fact that they are comfortable where they are is the indicator that they cannot travel where you are going. Do not let their limitation become your boundary. The road ahead of you requires a lean, unencumbered spirit. You cannot carry the heavy baggage of other people's expectations, doubts, and resentments into the territory God has prepared for you. The rejection you have suffered is actually a form of divine protection, closing doors that would have trapped you in a life too small for your spirit. Walk through the open doors of the new season. The people who are meant to run with you, the people who will recognize the gift you carry instantly, the people who will hold up your hands when you are tired, they are waiting on the other side of your willingness to let go of the past. They do not know your childhood mistakes. They do not care about your family's social standing. They will see the light of God in you, and they will receive it. I want you to hear this truth and let it sink deep into the marrow of your bones. Your calling is real, even if the people who share your last name or your zip code never believe it. Your worth is not up for negotiation in the court of public opinion in your hometown. The God of the restoration, the God who took a 14-year-old boy from a farm in Palmyra and shook the entire earth with his voice, is the same God who has laid his hand upon your head. He has not forgotten you in your isolation. He is framing your life, refining your character, and preparing you for an impact that will far exceed the small, provincial minds of those who currently dismiss you. Stand tall in your identity. Dust the dirt of Palmyra off your feet if you must, but do not stop walking. Now, let these words settle into your heart, and say them with me. Let this declaration seal your transition, break the power of human rejection over your mind, and activate the divine authority that is already waiting inside of you. I release the expectation that the people nearest to me will be the first to receive what I carry. My calling does not require their recognition to be real. I move toward those who are ready to receive it. I declare that my past does not define my future, and the limitations of those who knew me then have no power over who I am now. I am not disqualified by the silence of my family, the skepticism of my friends, or the rejection of my hometown. I am chosen, I am anointed, and I am being prepared for a work that is larger than the territory of my past. I sever the invisible cords of people-pleasing and human validation. I anchor my soul in the voice of the one who called me out of darkness into his marvelous light. I will not quiet my voice to make others comfortable, nor will I shrink to fit the rooms of my past. I step forward into the connections, the community, and the divine assignments that God has already prepared for me on the horizon. My eyes are on the future, my heart is secure, and my harvest is sure. Amen.